Hello and welcome to Security Scan. I am Uday Bhaskar. This week, the focus is on Bangladesh, and for good reason. The Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina is visiting India on April 7th, and personally, I would characterize this as perhaps the most important bilateral summit visit for Prime Minister Modi. Bangladesh remains India's most vital neighbor for a variety of reasons. And the more relevant for today's discussion is the distinctive security and strategic significance of Bangladesh in the Indian matrix. Geography endows Bangladesh with a special status in relation to India, and the politics of the subcontinent as it has unfolded from August 1947 to December 1971 when Bangladesh was born and beyond, burnishes the strategic contour of India's large eastern neighbor, whose Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, to her credit, remains firmly wedded to steering her Muslim majority nation towards a tolerant, relatively more secular path than what obtains on India's western flank. More than the 4,000-kilometer land border that India has with Bangladesh and the critical Siliguri corridor that connects the Indian mainland with the northeastern states, what is noteworthy is the potential that Bangladesh has for India's long-term security interests. India's worst-case scenario would be a Bangladesh that exudes the kind of anti-India fervor associated with the deep state in Pakistan, and a polity that goes down the path of inflexible Islamist radicalism and the attendant violence and bloodshed associated with it, again as one witnesses in the case of Pakistan. Furthermore, India does not want to see a Chinese footprint in the East that corresponds to the kind of deep and opaque Sino-Pak strategic cooperation that has adversely impacted India's security interests. Bangladesh also represents an interlocutor with whom India can further its sub-regional cooperation, an initiative that has been blocked by Pakistan in the context of SAARC. To discuss this entire spectrum of issues, we have an eminent panel. Allow me to introduce and welcome Ambassador Pinak Chakravarty, till recently India's High Commissioner to Bangladesh, Dr. Smruti Pattanaik of the IDSA, one of our foremost scholars on Bangladesh, and Vice Admiral Satish Soni, till recently the Flag Officer Commanding-in-Chief, Eastern Naval Command. Let me turn to you first, Ambassador Chakravarty. You have served in Bangladesh for many years and you have also addressed it from here in Delhi. How would you characterize both the Hasina visit and Bangladesh's relevance to India?
I think it's always useful to look at the geography when you look at Bangladesh. And you can see how Bangladesh abuts India in terms of geography, and it's a large nation of 160 million people. And so I think what we need to do is to get all those factors in place when we look at the overall security. Our security of our northeastern states. Now we have the Act East policy where Bangladesh is becoming a major player. We have all kinds of connectivities that are being put in place. And then of course there is the maritime domain where we're talking about the blue economy and security of the maritime domain. So there are a lot of things, and included in this is of course the role of Myanmar, because Myanmar is our bridge to ASEAN. So hence India's Look East and Act East policies have to take into account Bangladesh, and there is no way that an unstable Bangladesh will be good for India. So we have to look at win-win situations, things that mutually benefit both nations. Unfortunately, I think the economic development of Bangladesh is going very well.
Steady clip of 7%.
Steady clip of 7%, which not many countries. Bangladesh is one of the fastest growing economies, and it is doing well. It has done very well in RMG. We are pouring in investments. We are having cooperation in energy. There is an energy corridor being thought of, and of course we are helping them build their railways, road networks, and maritime, coastal shipping. All these things are happening, including, I believe, a pipeline that might transport petroleum products from the Numaligarh refinery to Bangladesh. Now, these are all what I call connecting tissues of our integrated South Asia, which of course Pakistan does not want to be part of. But then, as you mentioned, the sub-regional cooperation and all these things will basically knit all these countries together into a framework where we are all interdependent, depend on each other.
And a high-level visit should give the traction.
And a high-level visit always leads to more agreements, etc. And then we have to focus on implementation.
Dr. Pattanaik, if I could request you to perhaps look at the security dimension. We often say that India and Bangladesh have a number of areas where there is a correspondence, particularly in relation to this whole challenge of Islamic fundamentalism, radicalism, and Bangladesh's own experience. So could you help us to understand the bandwidth or the issues that come in the security umbrella?
I think two things one needs to remember, because it is extremely significant. And what is important is the manner in which Bangladesh in the past more than a year has been fighting the radical Islamist group, which has been regrouping in Bangladesh. And I think this focus on the JM, especially the group like JMB, came into being after the Bardhaman blast, where it was actually noticed that even if Bangladesh takes action against the radical groups who are operating within Bangladesh, there is a possibility of these groups crossing the porous border and coming and taking shelter in areas adjoining the border. I think that made it very, very significant that why cooperation on the issue of the radical Islamist is so significant in the context of India and Bangladesh. I think to her credit, for the past 2 years, especially when there were number of incidents of hacking where the secular bloggers were hacked to death, the government, especially after the Gulsan attack, has taken a serious note of how the internal challenges will impede on Bangladesh's success story economically, and the kind of investment it was getting in.
You are referring to Prime Minister Hasina's resolve.
Prime Minister Hasina's resolve. So I think for the past 1 year, and I find it very, very significant when I compare the action which the Bangladesh government has taken in past 1 year compared to the past 2-3 years ago, because there has been, like for example, many instances where the Bangladesh security forces, especially the Rapid Action Battalion and the police, they have taken action against various groups who are operating within Bangladesh and have taken shelter within the population center. I think that actually implies two things. Number one is that the kind of intelligence the Bangladesh government has been able to gather through various arrests which has successfully has made in the past 1 year. Of course, it is a process, so even if the success has come in past 1 year, but I think it is generally the success of the broader process which Bangladesh government has taken. And second issue is that the manner in which the resolve, you need a political resolve, especially to target this kind of violence which is being conducted in the name of religion. So therefore, I think it is extremely significant, being the Prime Minister of a country which has Muslim majority population. She has been able to convince the general public about the necessity to go against the groups, and which in fact has won a lot of praise for Prime Minister Hasina and her.
As a matter of fact, I would say that she has displayed very rare political courage in the way in which she has conducted herself in relation to Islam and ideology. But Admiral Soni, one of the other issues that we talk about in relation to India and Bangladesh, in the maritime domain particularly, we talk about the amicable way in which we were able to resolve the so-called maritime boundary delineation. And the second is this question of China now providing underwater platforms, submarines, to Bangladesh. So could you just help us to understand and frame those two?
Yeah, Bangladesh Navy set for themselves a goal in 2009 to become a blue water 3-dimensional navy. And since 2010, we have seen a series of acquisitions. They acquired 2 ships from UK, 2 old frigates from China, 2 frigates from US, they acquired 2 helicopters, 2 Dorniers, they've started building their own corvettes, they've started building their own fast attack craft, and now finally they have acquired 2 submarines, ex-China. So in some ways, they are already a three-dimensional force. Now, there are two ways that you can view these acquisitions. One, predominantly the acquisition, including that of arms and missiles, is from China. So it's Chinese are at doorstep. You're going to have Chinese officers, technicians, sailors working on their submarines, working in their dockyards. It could also mean that Chinese submarines who are deployed in the Indian Ocean could be refurbished in Bangladesh naval bases. But there is another view, and that is that we enjoy an extremely good rapport with the Bangladesh Navy, especially, as you said, after delineation of the maritime boundary dispute, which India has not objected and accepted, though it did not entirely go in our favor. We train about 20 officers and sailors of Bangladesh Navy in our training establishments. We have joint exercises. We have one planned this year, SAR and HADR. So there are numerous cooperation initiatives, including exchange of white shipping information, something which is doing the rounds. We are going to put up a coastal radar chain, hopefully on Bangladesh, to improve the MDA. So I think Bangladesh, we should look as a navy which we can collaborate with, which we can, and it adds to maritime security in the region rather than endangering it.
Well, that's good. I think, India can hardly afford to play a dog in the manger kind of attitude when it comes to Pakistan, or for that, but I beg your pardon, Bangladesh and China in terms of the military cooperation. But can I bring you in on this, Ambassador Chakravarty, which is two issues here. One is, when Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina came here the last time, there was a lot of expectation. We are talking about the previous UPA government. There was a lot of expectation about the water arriving at some kind of a modus vivendi on the IDSA water accord, which did not happen. This time around, in terms of expectations, that's one issue. Secondly, from the diplomatic angle, how would you frame China and the China-Bangladesh relationship and how that plays out for India?
You see, China is an important trader. But let me begin with the water issue first. I think we have so many rivers, transboundary rivers, and we have only one agreement on water sharing, which is the Ganga Waters Treaty. So Teesta was the second one because it's a major river which feeds the Jamuna, or what we call Brahmaputra in India. And it does have a problem in the lean season, which we call, in the summer. Now, there was a sort of agreement, informal agreement about sharing of those waters. Now, but it had to be sort of put into a proper treaty, which is ready and can be signed. But as you know, that it has got involved in domestic politics in India. The West Bengal government feels that this is not fair to West Bengal, particularly North Bengal. So hence it is stuck there. But I think over a period of time, I think this will probably be solved, because both sides will have to see and rise above domestic politics, particularly in India. Bangladeshis are ready to sign. So I think that is one aspect. So, but you remember how the LBA was signed, for example. We had consensus in Parliament. So there is a lot of background work that needs to be done. In terms of China's footprint, I think Admiral has already mentioned that the fact is that we cannot be suppliers, defense suppliers to Bangladesh. We've probably tried and failed to become defense suppliers. Hence, a country will go where it can get supplies at a cheaper rate, and China does provide that. And China has a geostrategic incentive to do so, where currently, when it is now spreading itself in terms of its PLA Navy, etc., into the Indian Ocean, all this Belt and Road Initiative, the Maritime Silk Route, all these plans that they have, it's spreading its wings, and it's done so in South China Sea, and it's going to do in the Indian Ocean as well. We have to take that into account, but we'll have to balance it out with our own relationship with Bangladesh and our other neighbors. So that is where we are at the moment, and hence this defense cooperation MOU or whatever, it's not that we don't have cooperation in the defense sector, we do have. But it is to put it in a framework that we are probably going for this MOU on defense cooperation. I think it is important to keep Bangladeshi defense forces engaged. We have talked about training, which is one of our strong points. And I think we should increase training,
I'll
etc.
come back to you on that, since we are on Rajya Sabha TV, to say that perhaps India and the Ministry of Defense could do a lot more in terms of this kind of regional military diplomacy, if you will, but I'll come back on that. Smruti, I wanted to ask you about another issue, which is more recently there's been a lot of anxiety about the Rohingyas. And this is really now becoming, again, a sub-regional issue because there are various countries that are involved. There is Myanmar, there's Bangladesh, concerns in India, and occasionally you hear voices from the west of India also about the fact that nobody is paying attention to the plight of the Rohingyas. Now, how would you, describe or explain to us the Rohingya challenge?
I think the Rohingya refugee issue in Bangladesh, it has been continuing for quite some time. So, though the spurt of violence in the recent past has resulted in many of the Rohingyas coming and finding place in Bangladesh. I remember 2 years back when there was violence against the Rohingyas in Myanmar. At that point of time, when the Rohingyas wanted to enter Bangladesh, Bangladesh said that it cannot accept, the Rohingya refugees because they already have more than 2 lakhs Rohingya refugees who have been living in Bangladesh for quite some time. And incidentally, some of the Rohingya refugees were recruited by the religious political parties, especially the Jamaat Islami, who have gone and fought in the Afghan war also. So, there are incidents like that, and also some of them were provided with passport and some of them are working in Middle East. So, the radicalization process within the Rohingya refugees is also a matter of concern because of the rising radicalism within Bangladesh. So, this is one issue which the government cannot ignore. But what is significant, the expectation of Bangladesh government is this, that taking into consideration the kind of relationship with India shares with Myanmar in terms of its relationship, the Bangladesh government somewhere wants the India to influence or at least persuade the Myanmar government to have a serious negotiation on the issue of the repatriation of the Rohingyas.
Some kind of a political
approach. Some kind of. So they think that if India has good relationship both with Bangladesh and Myanmar, so probably India should use its good office to see that this refugee crisis is resolved.
This is an issue where even some of the ASEAN countries have
Yes.
expressed a certain degree of concern, and this goes back to Islamic State and so on. But Satish, I wanted to ask you perhaps to weigh in on another issue, which is that, Pinak spoke about China and the OBOR and the grand plans that they have. There is a summit meeting that President Xi is calling in May. But do you think it's possible for India at a more modest level to look at the Bay of Bengal as an area for the equivalent of maritime cooperation? And as you are well aware, you've been CNC in Vizag, Bangladesh has done a fair amount of work in the blue economy, whether it was under the banner of the IORA or other fora. So is it possible for India to look at a modest kind of beginning which goes beyond what we are already doing in the Bay of Bengal, which has the principal stakeholders? Perhaps is BIMSTEC or a variation of that some kind of an initiative that we should be again resurrecting?
I completely agree with you. Bay of Bengal in the recent past has seen an enormous change. We have new ports which have come up on the on the coast of Myanmar. Bangladesh wants to develop a big port. Earlier it was Shonadia, now it is Paira. India has developed many ports along the eastern coastline, Krishnapatnam, Gangavaram, Ennore, Dhamra, to name a few. We have our project Sagarmala, which is going to see increased connectivity. So more importantly, the maritime boundaries have got resolved. So which is going to mean increased economic activity. Soon you will see more survey ships, surveying for oil, more drilling ships, more platforms. So all this is going to, mean more increased economic activity, and increased economic activity followed by increased presence of merchant ships will mean that you will need more collaboration, you will need more warships in the area to provide security, and that's exactly what the Bangladesh Navy and Myanmar Navy are aspiring to do, and that is why they are developing their navies. So like we have a trilateral on the western side between Maldives, Sri Lanka and India, and having Seychelles and Mauritius as observers.
This is the MDA, the Maritime Domain Awareness.
So while BIMSTEC is one platform, but I would, very strongly recommend that, on security issues, we collaborate more, and we need to be having more frequent discussions. and so that maritime security is enhanced.
Pinak, on this, whatever Satish is saying, that there is a lot of scope. You've been in Thailand apart from being in Bangladesh. Now, to me, as an outsider, as an analyst, I've often heard this being said even by our neighbors, saying that India could do a lot more in terms of its military engagement. And the sense I get is that while the MEA, the Foreign Ministry, is supportive of this kind of an engagement, there seems to be a certain hesitation or reluctance on the part of the Ministry of Defence. A, is this a fair characterization? And if so, what is the way ahead?
I think one has to remember that whatever engagement we have in the naval domain or any other domain is a function of resources that we deploy. I mean, how many times will you send a ship to Phuket, which is where with Thailand we have an annual kind of a exercise, or to other countries. But coming back to the Bay of Bengal, this trilateral initiative, which I have talked about also in many fora, is that it's high time, I think, we set up something where we can trilaterally work. It's also a useful way of engaging Myanmar in the trilateral thing. We can expand it later to include Thailand or include, because they also share the Bay of Bengal, or further south towards Indonesia and other countries. But then this trilateral initiative has to come from India. And I think, again, I would say, I don't know what kind of structure they want to set up. But setting up structures is not a problem. We have to think it through as to what we are going to do with these three countries. We have a trilateral highway which goes through Myanmar to connect us to the east, to ASEAN. So I think we will have to think about the maritime domain in a far more
holistic manner?
Holistic and in a detailed manner. And we have to come up with proposals and put it up to Bangladesh and Myanmar.
I'm still trying to get you to say something on MOD, which you have not, Ministry of Defence.
No, I said it obliquely in the sense that, look, it is MEA's job for foreign engagement on all fronts across the template. MOD will have to cut its clothes according to the kind of thing.
No, but so the only reason I'm raising this...
It's a question of resources, and MOD has to look at that. And also maybe the point that you are making, that MOD does not look at these issues in that same manner.
As I said, as takeaways go, I hope that MOD would consider making a certain fiscal allocation for military diplomacy and particularly the Bay of Bengal, but this is wishful thinking. At the end of the day, Bangladesh, as our discussion has indicated, has multiple layers of relevance for India's security and strategic interests. The visit of Prime Minister Hasina will hopefully impart that much needed high-level political traction for many initiatives that are still in the pipeline on both sides to be galvanized. Sub-regional cooperation, particularly in the maritime domain and river-related issues, have considerable potential. The India-China bilateral relationship will also be shaped to a considerable extent by the manner in which the relatively smaller South Asian neighbors deal with the two Asian giants. It would be prudent for India not to frame these options in a binary manner, meaning that the choice for a capital like Dhaka should not become either Beijing or New Delhi. Prime Minister Modi assumed office in May 2014 with a firm commitment to strengthening India's bilateral relations with the immediate neighbors. And this was reflected in the innovative manner wherein, for the first time, regional leaders were invited for the swearing-in ceremony of the Indian Prime Minister. Sagar, or security and growth for all in the region, is a Modi priority. Bangladesh is the most viable and vital neighbor to make this vision a reality, and we hope this objective will be realized very soon. On that note, allow me to thank my guests, Ambassador Chakravarty, Dr. Pattanaik and Admiral Soni. And thank you for watching Security Scan. Goodbye.